The latest NBA blockbuster quietly made the Spurs a better team, and here's why. The Devontae Graham trade, caught you off guard right there, happened earlier on Saturday morning, and a lot of people knew immediately from the get-go that, hey, the Spurs are up to something. They just freed up cap space, they just freed up a roster spot, and then a few hours later, it was starting to swirl around that they were going to be the third team facilitator in the DeMar DeRozan to Sacramento Kings trade, and they were. And they got a really good package out of it. First of all, they're getting Harrison Barnes, a 3-and-D wing. Something the Spurs were desperately missing last season is now heading his way to San Antonio, and he solves a problem that the Spurs were painfully obvious to last season, and that is the wing depth. Julian Champagnie started 59 games for the Spurs last season, and all 59 of those, he was just mediocre. All he was there was just to space the floor and be asked to shoot three-pointers, but even then, he wasn't doing it at a consistent rate, and his defense was subpar as well. When you have a guy whose only objective is to space the floor, you're gonna have bad lineups, and you're gonna struggle on both sides of the game, but it only got worse after that. Keldon Johnson came off the bench, and he really did the same thing as Champagnie. He shot threes, and he couldn't do it consistently. He was an absolute cone on defense, and he just made poor decisions. He tried to put his head down too much. He tried to play hero ball. That really cost the Spurs some games down the stretch, and it really dug them in bigger holes throughout the season that they just couldn't come back from. And now they're adding Harrison Barnes, who comes in and adds more elite veteran leadership. They just added Chris Paul, and now they're adding Barnes, who has championship experience. He was a part of the 2014-15 Warriors title and was a crucial piece in that run. The Spurs really needed a 3-and-D wing, and now they're finally getting one with the acquisition of Harrison Barnes, because that's what his reputation is built on. He stands 6'8", and he has a 6'11" wingspan, so he's long, he's tall, and he's lengthy, and the Spurs didn't have size at the wings last season outside of Jeremy Sohan, and we know the upside of his defense and what he could bring as one of the better perimeter defenders in this game, and how he's only going to get better from there. And then we know that Victor Wembanyama is 7'4", blocks everything that comes his way. Those two are really amazing cornerstones. Don't forget, they just added Stephon Castle, who is the best defensive guard in this draft and has one of the highest defensive upsides in the entire class, if not the entire league. Now, his offense is not one-dimensional at all, because when you get known as a 3-and-D wing, your job is to just catch and shoot threes, and that's something he's very good at. He can sit in the corner. He can sit on the wing, and when the ball comes his way, he's got a very good jump shot. His base is very low and quick. He can explode and just let it fly, and that's something that's going to be very crucial for the Spurs, is because really outside of Champagnie and maybe Malachi Branham, who also didn't do it consistently, the Spurs didn't have a lot of catch-and-shoot guys, and that's what Harrison Barnes is. But he is one of the better and more criminally underrated guys who can put the ball on the floor and just head downhill to the basket, and the Spurs need that. They need someone besides, they didn't have anyone really who could put their head down and just go to the basket. I mean, Trey Jones kind of did it, but even then, he was very undersized as well. So now the Spurs have someone who's 6'8", who is a little bit crafty with the basketball, and he's going to be able to push defenders and finish around the rim. He converts through traffic. He gets past defenders. He splits the lanes. I mean, this is a guy who is very smart, who is very quick when it comes to taking the ball to the basket and going to be able to get by defenders, get through defenders to score. The biggest piece about Harrison Barnes is that his contract is not bad at all. The Spurs had about $26 million going into the offseason, and then they waived Devontae Graham, so then they were left with $28 million. They're signing Chris Paul for $11 million. Now they're bringing in Harrison Barnes, who is on an $18 million contract this year and a $19 million next year, so that doesn't put them over the cap. They still have room to go past the first and second apron options, because who knows what the Spurs are going to do. Maybe they'll add another vet. They'll maybe try and sign someone a little more quieter. But the Spurs did not go over the cap, and they might still have a little more room to spend, as a lot of teams do. I mean, cap space is a myth at this point, so who knows what the Spurs are going to be able to do. But his deal is very team-friendly. It's very movable as well, because if he plays very well through the next few seasons, and there's a team at the deadline who's, a top-tier contender, because the Spurs probably will not be championship contenders in this season. They will definitely be much better than what they were last season after going 22-60. But I think at this point, by adding Chris Paul, by adding Harrison Barnes, and what Stephon Castle could bring, I think they will at least double their wins to 40. I could very much see that. This is a team that's gotten better by adding veteran leadership and adding some raw talent in Castle. And Wemby, his first 2 games in the France qualifiers have been nuts. He scored 24 points in 10 minutes and then 27 points in 19 minutes. And he's doing stuff that has NBA Twitter in chokeholds. Wemby is going to take a massive leap, and just that alone should maybe generate around 7 to 8 wins next season. So when he's only getting better, and then you're adding the young talent like Castle and adding mentors who are in solid players such as Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, who still have stuff to prove to this young team, the Spurs will only get better next season. I think they could be a fringe play-in, play-off team, maybe somewhere hovering around 9 to 7, playing in one of those early play-in games and earning one of the last seeds. I think Spurs fans should expect good things coming in this next season. But if there is a team at the deadline who is a top-tier contender, someone like maybe a Minnesota, a Denver who just lost KCP in the next 2 years, who see that Harrison Barnes is still playing well with what his contract is, they could say, hey, we want that, and then he gets moved at the end of the day. That's something to keep note of when this Harrison Barnes acquisition occurred, because that contract is still very movable. He's still very serviceable. You're going to get some good minutes off of him, but if there is a contender who wants him on their roster down the stretch, he can go there and still give them consistent minutes. The biggest part about this trade, though, is that Brian Wright is continuing to bring in draft assets. I hated the Rob Dillingham trade on draft day because we traded, what could have been one of the best scorers in this draft for 2 first-round picks in 2030 and 2031. And I mean, we literally traded for 12-year-olds, but he didn't stop. He just got an unprotected pick swap from Sacramento in 2031, and who knows? DeMar DeRozan will not be in the league anymore. Sabonis and Fox, we'll see. I can't remember exactly how old they are, but I think they're certainly not super young. So, I mean, that's 7 years from now. So who knows where that team could be. But if they're not good, and if the Kings win the lottery in 2031, then that pick goes to the Spurs. But I don't think they're going to wait out for those picks to land, because I do not think that the Spurs are done making acquisitions. They're getting a lot of draft capital. They have 14 first-round picks up until 2031. So I think there is someone on the market that they're looking at, and it's Lauri Markkanen from the Utah Jazz. They're looking to reshape their identity and go into a full rebuild mode, but Danny Ainge might want a pretty penny for his star, and I think the Spurs are going to be the ones willing to pay it unless they wait one more year, as he is on an $18 million expiring contract, and they wait to get him next summer, which I could totally see. But I wouldn't be shocked if Danny Ainge is thinking, all right, maybe Lauri Markkanen is not going to re-sign, but we also are not good enough to be a team that's in the playoffs, but we're too good to be a team to tank. So I think that scenario right there, especially with, a guy, I don't know, Cooper Flagg coming in 2025 and the loaded draft class that it is, I expect Danny Ainge to probably move on from Lauri Markkanen right now and get something out of him while they can. And the Spurs have the assets to do that. Keldon Johnson is on an $18 million contract, so that alone can match it. I think Trey Jones might potentially be out the door too. With how Stephon Castle played in his first summer league game, there is so much upside in him. So I think Trey Jones is definitely on the chopping block for sure. And we'll see. Who knows what Utah is going to do, but I think it should be a pretty fun season for the Spurs and a fun rest of the offseason. And if they continue to make moves, we'll be covering it here on Tide Talk Sports. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the post notification bell so you never miss when I upload the latest content here on my channel. The Spurs now have Harrison Barnes, and who knows what's next. But until then, this is Tide Talk Sports, and I will see you guys next time.